Good morning and good afternoon, depending where you are. My name is Emil Rudisell. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a program coordinator with Forge. I am excited to be here with you today to talk about mental health support for trans and non-binary survivors. As it says in the title, this is an introduction training, so we're going to go over some of the basics of what mental health can look like and what kind of supports we can offer. And we're especially focusing on people who are in advocacy roles, but hopefully this will apply to all of us in our lives and different ways that we can be there for folks. This project is part of a grant we have through SAMHSA. So here's our disclaimer: SAMHSA is not responsible for the content of this training. We are at Forge. And the plan for the day is to spend a little bit of time just getting grounded in what are we talking about when we talk about mental health, and particularly within trans and non-binary communities. What is the role of supportive community and a supportive advocate? And then look a little bit specifically at responding to crises and where you can learn more. Again, this will be an introduction, so please ask questions, share examples, thoughts, and ideas in the chat or in the Q&A so that we can talk through those throughout. And just for a bit of housekeeping, again, welcome. Thank you all for being here today, for taking this time out to be with us and to learn together. Please, throughout the training, take care of yourself in whatever way that means for you. This training is being recorded, so if you step away, you'll be able to come back and see it later. And we will send out the slide at the end, so you'll have access to those if it helps you for notes, anything like that. I love to see people using the chat and the Q&A to hear your experiences, your expertise, and to get your questions. Participation is totally optional. Furthermore, we do have ASL, so interpretation is available, and closed captioning is also available if you need those. My colleagues Michael and Caleb are here in the background helping me out with some of the tech support. If you're having any issues around technology, feel free to chat with them so that they can help you out and make sure you have access to everything you need. We will be talking about, mental health experiences of trauma and things like that throughout the training, just so folks are aware what you're getting yourselves into. And again, thank you all for being here. Just want to do a quick background on who Forge is. For those of you who aren't familiar, Forge has been around for 29 years. It's a trans-led anti-violence organization. Started in Wisconsin, but provides services nationally. And we've got folks, staff around the country now. About 25% of our work is in direct services to trans and non-binary communities and survivors, and 75% is training and technical assistance. So things like this event, as well as specialized trainings for organizations, victim service providers to help support trans and non-binary survivors and their loved ones. Our work is founded on principles of being trauma-informed and empowerment-based. And throughout that, we know that all of that has to be culturally responsive. So that is a through line running through it. Trans and non-binary communities are really different, and we need to tailor our support and our services to those unique cultures and aspects of our lives. We hope this training is also trauma-informed and empowerment-based. So again, choice in how you participate today, stepping away, coming back for the recording, anything like that. And the skills that we'll be talking about in terms of mental health support are really founded on those ideas too, that the support we offer to people will be trauma-informed and empowerment-based. So with that kind of who we are, quick introduction, I would love to hear a little bit about who has joined us today. So our first poll has been launched. You should have access to it on your screen. And let us know what role or roles bring you here today. Whether you're a domestic violence advocate, sexual assault advocate, you work in shelter, legal advocacy, healthcare, mental health care, or other. Feel free to also elaborate in the chat. This question helps me out because I know better how to give my examples. I'm going to give it like 2 more seconds before it closes. And we've got about half of the people that responded are sexual assault advocates, 20% are domestic violence advocates, a lot of folks in mental health care already. And those of you that picked other, feel free again to share it in the chat. Awesome. Human trafficking advocate I see in the chat. Social worker that works in anti-trafficking. And then see, one more poll. So how familiar are you with this topic? This topic being mental health care support for trans and non-binary communities. Great. Thank you, everybody in the chat. We've got state coalitions, genetic counselors, college administrators, nonprofits. Okay, a lot of folks working at sexual assault centers and in the college realm. Thank you. All right, to end this poll. Looks like half the folks are somewhat familiar, and some people are very familiar. We planned this as an introduction. So those of you who feel really familiar, please, join me in giving examples and helping to, dig more in depth. And then if you have questions, particularly that are bringing you here today, add those in the chat too, so that we can really, we'll do our best to do that broad overview that folks are expecting, as well as tailor it to what the folks who are here need. Great, thank you all, and keep sharing in the chat. So on the screen is a card that Forge has given out in the past that says, "I'm here for you." And a major theme of this training that we really wanted to start off with is that we need to show care for each other, for our communities, and we do that through being present, through being here for people, whether it's virtually or in person, in small ways or big. Having supportive people in our lives and being supportive to other people makes our lives better, and it makes our communities better. That having someone who's there with you maybe won't solve all your problems, but it does help, and it's a major part of the response that we're looking for and the support that we want to offer to folks. And as we get started, we're going to look at some other kind of key principles to the support that we want to provide, and then the way that we'll look at providing support throughout this training. And so the first one here is to be trans affirming. Okay, that means that we use someone's name and pronouns. We show respect for their identities. We value the existence of trans people in our world and in our communities and in our neighborhoods and in our services, and really, make that effort to be sure that as individuals, we're supporting trans folks, and that we do that organizationally. We want to help create affirming and supportive community by connecting survivors with others. A lot of survivors, and particularly trans and non-binary survivors of intimate partner violence or sexual assault, talk about isolation and how the violence has interfered with their connection with others, with their community. And so part of our role in mental health support is connecting people with caring others. That also, and we'll get more in depth on this later, helps make it so that we don't have to do everything ourselves. You want to have a team, a network of people that are supporting someone, or that you're getting support from, for those of us who are also seeking out support. And then be present. Shared the I am here for you part. Being present without needing to fix things is really critical. Sometimes a lot of us in professional roles may try to jump to solutions really quickly. We want to see people feeling well and thriving, but taking time out to be around for big feelings, for sharing stories, for all of that is really critical to providing support. And Michael just dropped in the chat a link for you all. Throughout this training, we'll put in links for some of our references, and we also have them all at the end. So SAMHSA has put together a guide on trans-affirming mental health supports. And we also have a research study about how collective self-esteem and social support can be really important for people. So for those of you curious on kind of the research side of things. So I'm not going to go super heavy into statistics here. The SAMHSA link has a fair amount of statistics, and there are other resources that we'll share that have some of the stats and percentages here. But instead, just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we do see that trans and non-binary people are generally at higher risk for depression, anxiety, trauma, suicidality, and other mental health concerns. This is really strongly connected to the increased experiences of violence, the anti-trans discrimination that people are experiencing personally and seeing happen to their communities and to people who share identities, share connection with them. So folks call this minority stress, and that's a particular name for the stress, the exhaustion, the discrimination that comes from being part of a community that's experiencing oppression and discrimination. We also see that these higher risks are related to a lack of affirming support, and a lack of care, and then barriers to care. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. And then stigma on being trans or non-binary, stigma on talking about and getting mental health support, all sorts of things like that. So, overall, we just realized that living in a world that doesn't value your existence can really increase distress and mental health concerns. Many mental health diagnoses that we'll talk a little bit about are part of normal human variation, right? We could live in the safest, most supportive world, and some people would still experience depression, mood disorders, schizophrenia, or other mental health conditions. So it's really important that we recognize that mental health complexities and concerns are a part of being human. And by normalizing that, we can help decrease some of that stigma that people experience. And we can recognize that when we're living in a stressful, unsupportive world, when there are barriers to getting our basic needs met, things like that, that can increase the challenges that we experience with our mental well-being. And just a reminder that when we look at the violence that trans people experience, we want to recognize that people have many different identities. So we're not just experiencing life as a trans person. You also have race, ethnicity, physical health, culture, age, personality, location. All of these different aspects of our life play into our connections, the ways that we want to get support, the ways that we build community with each other, the ways that we ask for help, that we receive help, that we express our feelings, all of that. and that people experiencing multiple marginalization are going to have possibly increased higher risk for that discrimination. So and we're seeing, currently a lot of increases in, hate-based violence directed towards a lot of different communities, including trans communities. So that's going to be having an effect on a lot of people. With that, though, anyone can experience mental health challenges. So sometimes we have stereotypes about what mental health challenges or diagnoses look like and who experiences them. And while there are very real inequities in who experiences mental health concerns, such as due to violence and stigma I mentioned earlier, we also know that anyone can have a mental health diagnosis or a mental health concern or challenge that is not diagnosed. And having a diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean somebody is struggling or feeling challenged either. People have different relationships to all of these labels and health and well-being. And as advocates, I think that is critical to remember because sometimes in social services and things like that, someone who is maybe the quieter person can be overlooked as needing additional support. And sometimes, someone who is louder or frequently asking for help and support can be seen as disruptive. And I see there's a sound quality problem. Is it better if I hold my microphone like this? Okay, I'm going to try. Great. So we'll keep the microphone here. If I drop it, feel free to remind me in the chat. Thank you, Olga, for bringing that up. Okay. So sometimes people act or respond in ways that we personally don't like. And so it's really important that we notice the stereotypes and biases that we have so that we can address those and so they don't negatively impact who we're offering support to and how we offer support. So, thinking about some of those stereotypes, it's important that we remember that people with mental health concerns or challenges might be strong, they might be tough, they might be loud, they might be quiet, they might be resourceful, or they might be well-resourced, having a lot of resources kind of externally already. They may be protective or scared or brave or angry or all of the above. They may have hurt someone in the past, as well as having been hurt by somebody. They may have a history in the court system, which I think especially for social services is important to remember that there's lots of reasons people can be involved in the court system and, to not have that automatically keep us from services when we can. And they may respond to experiences in ways we don't like. Again, so noticing our reactions is really critical to addressing that bias. So I've been, saying things like mental health and mental health challenges and concerns a lot. So just a note about what mental health is. Again, this is like our introduction. Everyone's got mental health. Kind of like we all have physical health. Sometimes our mental health is great. Sometimes it's less great. And all of us take care of our health in various ways. So whether or not you feel like you have mental health challenges or concerns, you're taking care of your mental health through the way that you live your life. So there's lots of positive aspects to our mental well-being. And everyone needs care and support from others. And there is no one on this planet that lives their lives entirely alone, right? Probably somebody made your clothes, helps, grow the food that you eat, and we talk to each other, we get support from each other in lots of ways. Support is a normal part of human existence. And again, the way when we can destigmatize that, it can help people ask for help. It can help create an environment where people are better able to talk about what's going on from them and create that supportive, affirming community. And then when we talk about mental health challenges, what we see is that a lot of things often get lumped together. And I'm going to lump them together, to be quite honest, because uh, many folks in this training are not licensed professionals diagnosing people, right? And we are not here to have a training on how to make a diagnosis. So when I'm talking throughout this training about mental health challenges, that includes, somebody who has a specific diagnosis, and maybe they are struggling with it or not. It also includes undiagnosed or misdiagnosed mental health concerns. For those of you who are less familiar with the diagnosing process, um, you people look at lists of symptoms, behaviors, experiences that people have, and do their best to kind of figure that out. The list of symptoms and matching them to diagnosis changes. And as people are able to, talk more about their experiences, figure things out, um, something that could be related to trauma may have been misunderstood as depression or something else before somebody knew about the past experiences. And a lot of people don't have access to the resources needed to get a diagnosis or a label for what they're experiencing. And some people don't want a diagnosis or a label. We're also really looking at the impacts of trauma, stress, and possibly sensory overload. That's a feeling of overwhelm when what you're experiencing of the world is too much. Can be related to being neurodivergent, to experiences of trauma, to exhaustion or stress. Um, so, sensory overload is, for folks not familiar, is things like when the lights just feel too bright, when every sound hurts, this feeling of overwhelmed based on the stimulation. And it looks different for different people. There can be different, some people are more sensitive to sound or light or texture or taste. And then we also look at short and long-term crisis. So this could be, a loss in your family or in your life. It could be a long-term situation that someone's dealing with. And it can also be, experiences of violence, as so many people are here as advocates in sexual assault or domestic violence. Those experiences may be, for a lot of people, a trauma or a crisis. So those are the things we're going to look at as we look at behaviors. And for advocates, often we're not going to know what is going on for someone or why specifically um, they're having the experience they're having. So in this next section, I want to look at some of the things that we might see or hear from folks that we're working with or in community with. And what's important to think about in this section is that as we notice a particular behavior or action or change in someone, that I don't necessarily know, is it connected to trauma, to a mental health diagnosis, to substance use, to physical health and well-being? Um, and we don't always need to know in order to be present with people. And sometimes when we're present with people, we're able to learn more information about what's happening in their lives to know and to figure out, maybe what next steps could be for that person. As I'm looking through this, questions, thoughts so far? put them in the chat as they come in for you. So in terms of trauma-informed care, experiences of trauma have impacts on people. And again, it's going to vary widely. Some people who have experienced trauma in their lifetimes may have long-term changes in how they live their lives. Some people may not. Not every harmful, scary incident is going to feel traumatic for everyone. So there's a lot of variation here. But what we know generally about trauma is that it decreases the ability of someone to manage and regulate their feelings. It decreases the ability to have the energy to get things done, to self-soothe, which is connected to that managing of the feelings. So that's, our ability to comfort ourselves and tell ourselves it's going to be okay. It decreases our trust in others, oftentimes. And it can have a lot of effect on the parts of our brain that plan things out, that think about logistics, manage time, all of that, the executive functioning, which is connected also to our ability to tell stories, and especially to tell stories in a linear fashion. So often what you'll see is that somebody's, the way people talk may jump around, their brain is connecting different things in different ways than you might do. And so for outsiders, stories may feel more confusing, but if you understand it could be related to trauma, that can be really helpful. Traumatic responses can also increase the likelihood that someone feels a lot of tension, anxiety, or panic. So there's higher rates of kind of being on edge, being jumpy, emotional volatility. So having quick changes in feelings or big changes in feelings. People may be more likely to be avoidant or to disassociate, to disconnect from possibly their bodies, their surroundings, from other people. There's an increased likelihood of folks using drugs or alcohol to cope as a way to comfort themselves, a way to kind of lower some of the feelings that may be big, or to feel something for people who are numb. Increased likelihood of trauma reminders, what folks call triggers, and also an increased likelihood of suicidality. So we do see that folks who've experienced lots of forms of violence and harm and traumatic experiences in their life, especially in trans and non-binary communities, have an increased likelihood of considering suicide. And being trauma-informed means that we think about our services with this framework in mind. So if we know that folks are that we're working with are at an increased likelihood of feeling anxious and disconnected and have a harder ability planning and trusting people, that can really change the way that we set everything up, from how we greet people to how we connect with them. And so it's really important that your services be trauma informed in that way. So in these next couple slides, I'm going to look through some categories of other things that you might see in someone who's experiencing mental health challenges, again, in this broad sense of what that means. And as we talk about these, again, feel free to add examples in the chat. But I also want to encourage folks to notice your reactions. Are there times where you feel more scared of a certain behavior, or you feel more prepared to respond to one thing than another? Are there things that you maybe judge? And just noticing those reactions as they come up, you don't have to share them in the chat, but you can help us to just do that work of destigmatizing what happens and being able to really be present. And again, share additional examples in the chat. especially those of you who shared you're really familiar with this, you can help add to it and make it concrete. All right, let me drink some water. So first we'll look at emotions. It covered some of this in trauma responses, but these can also be connected. Again, we don't necessarily know why someone is having these feelings. It could be connected to a lot of different things, but big, in quotation marks, feelings that are stronger than we would necessarily expect. And that could be anything. That could be folks who are angry or sad. It could be folks that are super happy and cheerful, just in a way that's really disproportionately big. Less control over emotions and reactions, and that it's harder for folks to regulate. When anger comes, it stays, or it comes really fast. Numbness, a lack of visible emotional response. So somebody may be feeling an emotion, but to you, there's nothing that you can see or no way for you to tell that. And some folks, are disconnected from that emotion, have a sense of numbness. Feelings might seem out of place. Many of us have probably seen the example of laughter at a funeral, or when you get bad news and somebody laughs. It's not because they think it's funny, it's the way their brain and body is processing that information. So this is good for us to remember, if we're talking to somebody and they're telling you a story about something that happened to them, and it's violent or scary or harmful, and they're laughing, it doesn't mean it's a joke or they're not serious about it at all. It could be connected to their experiences. Again, quick changes in moods. And then emotions can have really physical symptoms. And this is especially true. Some communities and cultures are more connected to the physical side of emotion. So headaches, tiredness, my stomach hurts, especially if you're working with kids, belly aches can often be feelings related. So those are all things to be aware of. Connection and trust. So distrust of others, as well as kind of the other side. Some folks, as a result of trauma or as a result of mental health conditions or complexities, may be quicker to trust people. They have a lot of, everyone's instantly their best friend, or people tell stories of what has happened to them, what their experiences are, really really regularly and frequently, in a way that's more often than many people do. You see withdrawal, avoidance, and again, on the other side of that spectrum, seeking continuous or intense connection, and seeking affirmation or feedback constantly. So folks who are, for those of you maybe who work on hotlines, it could be the person that calls every single day, and talks about the same thing every single day. They need that connection, and that connection is could be really affirming and supportive to them. And then there may be the distrust of others, distrust of situations, could be intense enough to be, what we might label paranoid. So really, feeling of intense distrust for folks. And depending on your role, these all can show up in different ways. If you're talking one-on-one to somebody, you're going to talk to some people who take a really long time to ever tell you anything, if they ever do. And you're going to talk to some people who immediately share a lot. So just recognizing, again, these spectrums are part of our human experience. Communication can also look really different. Some people may speak more slowly or more quickly. And if it's somebody that you've known for a while, you might notice that there's a change, right? And so that could be a sign that somebody is needing more support if you're seeing that most of the time they've talked to you at a certain pace, and one day they come in and their pace is really, really slow, or their tone is really, really quiet. Those changes could be a sign that you want to give additional support. Their speech might follow a clear pattern or timeline. For sexual assault advocates, human trafficking advocates, folks who might be involved with the legal system, this is really important to remember, because people within the legal system or the criminal justice system may be trying to get a very linear timeline of a crime that happened or violence that happened, and it can be hard for a survivor to give that. And realizing again that is part of possibly how trauma is showing up, or part of how their brain is processing their lives. Somebody might have slurred speech, or other things like that. Here, this is another one where it's really important that we don't immediately assign a cause. In our work as advocates, someone's speech or voice changes could be due to an injury, including due to strangulation, which can have major health effects on someone and is unfortunately really common in intimate partner violence. It could be due to substance use. It could be due to other stuff going on for the person. So we don't always know, and you don't want to jump to making an assumption about what's happening for somebody, in case that assumption is wrong, or can create a barrier to their services. Also find people might curse a lot. People might speak without directing their speech at a person. I didn't share kind of my background, but I've worked in domestic violence and at coalition levels supporting shelters and services for a long time. And in shelters, it can be difficult for advocates and for other residents in shelter, not knowing how to respond when somebody's, speaking and not directing that speech at a person. And so realizing again that this could be a sign that that person needs additional support. It could be a normal part of the way they live their lives, but we're just recognizing that it's happening. And really sitting with, maybe I don't need to fix this right now. Maybe it's not a problem for that person. Other things that I found, often challenging for advocates are not responding to questions or comments. It doesn't mean somebody's rude. They could be taking a long time to process the information. They could literally have not heard you because they're disassociated or disconnected from what's happening right then. And we've got two more, and I see we've got a question about how we can kind of incorporate this in. So memory, again, for especially for folks who are in roles where either you're talking to someone about a specific story or experience, possibly needing to gather evidence, like if you're at a forensic exam, and if you're working with somebody long term on resources and connecting them to help and supports memory, can also come a lot. So people might focus on a specific event or memory and have a hard time focusing on anything else. People may have difficulty with short-term memory. So you have a conversation with someone and they forget already, what you just talked about. Some people are only able to process one step of instructions at a time. And you might need to repeat yourself over and over and over again. And that's okay, because that's what that person needs for you to really be there. And then flashbacks. So flashbacks are when somebody reconnects, feels like they are living that experience again. And we also see challenges and changes in how people meet their basic needs. And for those, again, this may be something that you're going to notice if you're working with somebody long term, that you see a change, or it might be something that somebody brings up to you either directly or indirectly. So eating more or less than usual, not enjoying food, sleeping a lot, not sleeping at all, frequently falling asleep or sleeping not in the bed. Again, at domestic violence shelters, folks will fall asleep on couches. People may fall asleep in the waiting room if you're kind of in an office setting, things like that. Difficulty taking care of hygiene needs or focusing on them in a way that gets in the way of daily life. So you might be working with somebody who just isn't able to take showers or take showers that often, isn't able to do their laundry. Sometimes that's because of logistics, not having a house, not having laundry, not being able to afford it. And sometimes it's because of what's going on mentally for them. It's too much, it's too hard, or they can't remember to do it. So you may work with somebody, where you're noticing those changes, and especially trouble planning, scheduling, and keeping track of responsibilities. And all of that is going to connect to difficulty finding and keeping employment, challenges with daily living, um, having ups and downs, good days and bad days. So one thing we want to remember here is that if you're working with somebody over time and one day they come in and they're happy, doesn't mean everything's fine. You can, celebrate the good day without assuming that all days in the future will be good. And that can be affirming for people, that they know, that you're there through those ups and downs. Right. And this is the last of this set of slides. I saw there's a bunch in the chat. So other things that you might notice are, coping mechanisms that people have, fidgeting, pacing, sleep, self-injury, specifically non-suicidal self-injury, defensive reactions. So that could be in, how they talk with you or others, physically, either, needing to always be by the door, or being really guarded about, the information they give, the questions you ask. Somebody might, have a hard time assuming good intent from others. And steps for self-protection. So here, as advocates, one of the things we can do is to create an environment where somebody is able to do some of the coping mechanisms that they need in order to be present with you. So you don't need to ask somebody, you don't need to make somebody sit down, right? If they want to pace around while y'all are talking, great. If you have a space where you can confidentially and safely go for a walk around the building or outside, or, do a task like doodle together while you talk, sit side by side instead of face to face, those things may help somebody so that they can, fidget, pace, move around, not make eye contact, whatever it is that's helping them. All right. So now we're going to shift to the how we help, which I think is the conversation that was going on in the chat. And so we're going to take like 2 minutes for y'all to answer this question in the chat. How are you currently supporting survivors' mental health? And really, what I've been talking about applies to lots of survivors, not just trans and non-binary communities, but really thinking about trans and non-binary folks and survivors. What are you already doing that's working? So share that in the chat. If you need to get up and stretch, we have a minute or two while people will be typing away to do that. And that gives me a minute to read this great chat conversation happening. Great. Thank you all. And I want to highlight a couple things that I saw up in the chat in case anyone's not following along there. We are going to talk briefly about suicidality in a little bit. So I just hear that's coming. And I saw folks shared some resources about if you're in an institution that's not trauma informed, how to do that. So we'll pin that question too. One comment is, thank you for pointing out that speed changes are better compared to previous experiences with the same individual. To someone raised in Minnesota and Wisconsin, someone from the East Coast who talks fast and animated can code as nervous or manic when it's just normal. Someone from other areas may code as too slow or slurred. We need to not apply our standards to the speech patterns of others. Yes, and I wanted to highlight that because I appreciate the cultural aspect of this too, right? So a lot of the things that we talked about, speed changes, behavior patterns, movement, may be connected to, something totally not related to mental health, like where you grew up, or your culture, community. Talking really loudly. Some folks grew up in families that just have a louder speaking voice than others. I know I can tend to have a really quiet speaking voice, which is why my microphone's right here. And so that could get coded differently. Sorry. Oh. Scrolling through some slides. All right. So some things that are already happening. Having fidget toys or things to touch in your office can be useful to folks. Absolutely. And making sure there's choice around that. Really trauma-informed principles and choice and empowerment are big within those. So when people are able to have those options, meeting them where they're at and building trust and consistency. That's great. And I will add to building trust, part of this is being able to recognize people are going to build that trust at different paces. I went to a training once where the person said, we aren't trying to get people to trust us. We need to prove that we're trustworthy, and then they have the choice to step into that trust or not. And I love that shift because it helps me focus on what I'm doing to demonstrate that I'm trustworthy, and I'm not trying to control the other person. It's their choice if they trust me or not. But I can control my behavior to be flexible and to work on how I can show I'm trustworthy though. Great. Other things that folks are already doing, this is a lovely list, holding safe wellness spaces like meditation, trauma-informed movement, and yoga. They're great. So recognize not everybody gets the same thing, gets healing from the same thing. Connection to bodies, movement, art, all of that may be healing. And especially for trans and non-binary communities, if you're doing movement-based stuff, no matter what, make sure that you have privacy for changing spaces, for bathrooms, for things like that. Really think about how people can be comfortable. Even just sharing like, wear whatever you want, or we're going to do this kind of stretching, so wear clothes you feel fine about, can just help people kind of have access to something that's new to them. Listen, validate, psychoeducation, support people in using grounding, mindfulness, slowing down with them, going for a walk and drawing. Great. Culturally specific therapy groups, therapeutic interventions, which are culturally competent and individualized. Excellent. Yeah, so y'all are already thinking about really seeing the uniqueness of each person. There's no That, that's what we want to do with our support, and be able to ask questions and listen to people in ways that allow us to do. Great. So we have another one that says pulling an affirmation card at the beginning of a meeting. So it's a great way to start off on, a joy or an affirmation. And throughout, when we're working with people, especially people who've experienced violence or marginalization, sometimes the world focuses so much on the bad. So creating space for joy, for, those positive affirmations can be really good. Tailoring appointments to what the person needs. Excellent. Evidence-based practices. So especially for those of you who are clinicians and are providing EMDR, things like that, tailoring that to what the person needs. Explore the office space, talk about safety, have blankets, stuffed animals, pillows, etc. If you're working virtually, starting with a short call. This is great. Oh my gosh, there's 17 more. I'm not going to read through all of these. Michael and Caleb, if there are ones that you really want to highlight, if you'll kind of note those, and we can come back to them in a minute. Thank you all. Keep reading the chat and adding to it. Great. And we'll share what's Michael just offered to compile these. So I think for a lot of y'all, based on everything you just shared, this is clear. We start with believing people about their experiences. And what's critical here is, if you're in the sexual assault, domestic violence field, you probably know to believe survivors. We also need to believe trans and non-binary folks about their experiences. And there's unfortunately too much questioning of, are you sure, that sort of thing. So affirming people throughout our services in who they are, who they know themselves to be, or the experience of them figuring out who they are, and playing with that and exploring that can also be affirmed, as well as making sure that we're avoiding victim blaming, and that we believe, survivors. And that affirmation can be really critical. As you all probably know, abusers, people who cause harm, often blame survivors for the abuse, for the violence. And so our support of saying, it's not your fault, I believe you, I'm here for you, you deserve care and respect. We may say that thousands and thousands of times to somebody, that is critical in helping, to kind of dislodge the harmful messages that somebody got. So our support, y'all listed tons of really specific ideas, which I love, and it can help to kind of ground in what are the principles, right? So when we think about what we want to do, we want to be present with people. That can be physically, or it can be virtually. We can talk over the phone or text or have Zoom meetings. Sometimes we're present but not talking. So somebody may just want to sit quietly in the same room with you. You definitely want to assess the situation and get the person's consent. You're talking with somebody and they're having a hard time. Can I sit here? Speaking of the chair that's next to them or something like that. We don't have to talk, but would you like me to just be here with you? Communicate about your availability. I'm going into a meeting. I'm not ignoring you, but I just won't be able to answer phone calls at these times. Letting people know your boundaries within whatever your role is, and your availability. Listen and affirm. Affirmation doesn't mean you have to agree with everything someone says. So for example, someone says, everyone hates me. You don't have to be like, yeah, that's true. Like, please don't be like that. Instead, you might affirm how that feels. So the affirmation is really for the feeling. it must feel terrible to feel that way or to think that. It can be in question, how does that feel for you? And things like that. Collaborate. This is another trauma-informed principle. So working with the person to come up with support and solutions. Learn about what they've tried. Ask questions about what's been going on. Again, this goes back to the not jumping to fix it. They may have already tried all the things that we're about to suggest. So if we can listen and learn, we can also get more creative. Yeah, so I said affirmation doesn't mean you have to agree with what somebody says. In the example of somebody says something like, everyone hates me, I want to affirm how that feels for them, without necessarily saying that belief is accurate. I hope that difference makes sense. So I'm affirming it must feel terrible to feel that way, or I hear you're really hurt by that feeling. Yes, thank you. We got in the chat, acceptance of the emotion or thought doesn't mean approval. Next up, connect. Help the person connect with support, internal and external, identifying their strengths, their internal resources, talk about what brings them comfort, and then also connect with additional support. That may be building a team of people. If some of you all might be here thinking about a friend or a community member. Who else can they call on when they're overwhelmed? If it's calling a professional service or maybe a hotline that has a different set of expertise than you do, can you do it together? Rather than say, here's the phone number, call later. Why don't we call right now? I'll sit next to you. And that can help make, specific plans. And then create a soothing environment. And again, we'll compile these great examples you all gave: lighting options, predictability, letting people know what the physical environment will be like. This can be really helpful, again, for folks meeting their different sensory needs. Sometimes a loud office or a messy bedroom or bright lights can further contribute to stress. So if you're talking on the phone to somebody and they're at home, you might talk through, do they want to make a cozy nest in their house with tea, or take a shower, if they're in their office, offering choices. It is important to note that for some people, quiet is actually really scary and hard to deal with. So not everybody is going to want a calm, quiet environment. Some people are going to do better when there's noise or sound, or you're responding. Great. Some more things to do. Let's see what we haven't talked about yet. Talk privately. Hopefully this is a given. If you're in groups settings, like not a support group, but just there's a bunch of people around, try to have the conversation more privately if that's what the person wants, especially if you have, follow your legal protections of confidentiality and privilege if those are applicable to you. Ask questions, and create a space where the person can talk and share, and open-ended questions are going to be more helpful here. Though if somebody's really struggling, sometimes you start with offering choices or, yes or no questions, and then build to open-ended as they get more comfortable. Support their decisions as much as you can. And sometimes that's naming a few different choices and asking, do any of those sound good to you? Do they feel like they will work? Help connect with further resources, listen without judging. So again, that you're accepting the emotion or the thought doesn't mean you have to approve it. And also noticing your feelings. Is something they're saying making you want to back away? Really pay attention to ways you might accidentally be conveying judgment. let them know you aren't alone, and share the information as they want it. Folks may be overwhelmed with a lot of information really quickly, and some folks want to know all of the details. So really getting to know somebody throughout. Right. If someone discloses a specific diagnosis to you, again, just a reminder to be non-judgmental. Some people find a diagnosis super helpful, and it's a thing that they they want, and it affirms their experiences. And some people it feels really bad and awful, and some people it's both. Um, do be aware. I mentioned this earlier: misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis. So, depending on what your role is, it's okay if you don't know everything about that specific label. That might not be your role to help people with that, but you can help them connect with folks um, who do provide those services. And in general, just work to normalize talking about mental health. Um, I was thinking as I was preparing for this, a podcast I used to listen to um, always ended with something like, drink some water, take your pills, call your person. And I just loved that kind of like, here's the things we do. It is normal to use medication to take care of our minds and our bodies, and that's okay. And sometimes we need a reminder to take those. Um, so really just helping to make it clear that you are someone people can talk to. Some other things that you can do to help um, is work with somebody on creating a routine. For some people, um, that planning and processing can be really impacted. Um, and so creating a routine can be helpful in their well-being and figuring out how to take care of themselves. What reminders do I need to drink water, to take medication if applicable? Uh, connection. Connection should be a major theme of all of this. I hope y'all are seeing that we need other people, and we need to connect with them in the ways that are good for us, and those ways vary for everybody. Um, Finding mental health professionals, that might be through telephone or video-based services, and then helping people access that. So for those of you working in domestic violence or sexual assault, maybe you're helping somebody get internet access so they can have a Zoom meeting with their counselor. Uh, those kind of practical steps can be really critical part of support. So it's not just here's a referral to a counselor. It's here's how we can make it actually realistic for you to have those counseling sessions that you want. Sometimes that's like, here's a planner. Let's fill out your calendar together. Here's a small pad where you can take notes. We're going to make these phone calls together if you want. And really assisting people in figuring out how to remember and organize their plans and thoughts. I know working on hotlines, people are like, I called you before. Well, I've called 100 people before and I don't remember who any of them are. And that's really common. It's overwhelming, and people have to call a lot of different places to figure out the ones that can help. And for specific tools, Michael put a link to this in the chat. So please is a way to remember it. So this can be a helpful thing to talk through to somebody. Again, really take an empowerment approach and choice. But caring for our physical well-being, addressing physical illness or injury, and taking medications as prescribed. Many medications, if you rapidly change, either going on or off of them, can affect your mood, your behavior, how you feel in ways that don't always feel great. So, thinking through those steps with people. Balanced eating. A lot of folks, again, may just like not ever feel like eating, but our bodies do need food. So um, feeling hungry can really affect our mood. Mood altering substances, altering is the A. Maintain good sleep, again, missing sleep can have huge effects on our mood, our abilities to regulate. And exercise, this is not everybody needs to do an exercise routine, but like moving our bodies in the ways that work for us and that our bodies can move in can be really beneficial. Um, so if you approach things like this, you do it in a really compassionate way. Um, Acknowledging, I'm here with you. I can see how much pain you're in. Would it be okay if we made sure your basic needs are met as we're talking? Have you eaten today? Could we get you a sandwich while we're working on this problem together? Things like that are more supportive and affirming. Recognize your own bias and the bias of others, which can have a huge impact. So again, many trauma responses, many of the things I talked about are unfortunately mistakenly perceived as signs that someone is lying. So when someone doesn't make eye contact, when they react with anger instead of fear, or when their fear doesn't look the way that somebody expects it to look, or describing upsetting situations with no emotion. Um, all are really common and really commonly misunderstood. So, um, recognize that we may have our own bias about these things, and that others. So you might see somebody, having a hard time saying that they weren't believed. If you misinterpret or misunderstand a situation, that happens, and it can be really helpful to just name it. I apologize. I misinterpreted you looking away from me. I am here for you. And some more conversation starters for folks who need them or want them. I'm here for you. Do you want to take a walk so we can talk just ourselves, especially if privacy is an issue wherever you were initially talking? I'm concerned about your safety based on what you told me. Is it okay if I ask you more questions about what's going on? Can I tell you about some of the resources around here? Maybe we can call them together. These all offer choice. You're being specific, and you're connecting with the person in an empathetic way. So, what to do when there is a crisis? So, some things you might want to look out for: sudden changes in behavior, uh, including being happy, giving things away, or withdrawing really intensely. Unexplained injuries, messages that imply goodbye, and if somebody has access to weapons, that it's kind of a risk factor, not necessarily a sign of crisis. And then stressful life events. So somebody loses their job, a relationship ends, a loved one dies, things like that can all be just kind of, let's make sure we're paying a lot of attention in this situation. So when you think there might be a crisis, there's a couple things that you want to do. And first, what is the crisis? So gather information, whatever you can, if possible. Slow down and be prepared. So we are both going to respond quickly, but respond thoughtfully, and take a second, whether it's taking a deep breath or taking a minute or two, depending on what the situation is. And then think about who gets to decide what is a crisis. Just because it's a crisis for you doesn't mean it's a crisis for the person having that experience. And the other way around, you may think something is no big deal, but the survivor, the person you're working with, it is a crisis for them. So we want to take their experience of that really seriously and center that experience. Consider what might be needed: physical presence, resources, food, water, medications, and emotional support. And then what do you need? What are you able to offer in your role? And, with your current capacity, where can you reach out for additional support? And are your physical needs met? Again, it's going to vary based on the situation. If there is an immediate, like physical emergency in your office, you might not have time to think, I need to eat a sandwich before I respond to this. But if you're realize that you haven't eaten for 8 hours and you're about to, call somebody back who is having a hard time, that could be a good chance to make sure you get yourself a snack and fill up your water glass before you're there so that you can really be present and take care of yourself. So you have those right to make sure your needs are met too. And how you do that is really going to vary on the situation. And again, these, if you can stick to, these key kind of forms of support, being present, listening and affirming, collaborating, that can all make a huge difference in the support that you offer. So in terms of physical presence, and again, I'm brought into this to cover a wide range of crises. Keep your voice calm as much as you can. So again, that step of taking a moment to get grounded, to make sure your needs are met, can help you to approach the situation calmly. This picture is actually a person with a horse, and I like that, that thinking of that connection we have with others. Our energy really affects other people, and sometimes we see that more immediately in our connections with animals, but our connection with humans also, the energy we bring to it makes a difference. Move slowly. If there is a physical emergency, an emotional emergency, you do want to respond quickly, but you don't want your movements to be interpreted as threatening, as dangerous. So often, walking up slowly where your hands are visible, things like that can help show that you are a safe, grounded person to be around. Announce what you're doing before you do it. I'm going to sit down next to you. I'm putting some water here if you want to drink it. I'm gonna move this weapon away from here. Those sort of things just helps a person get grounded to what's happening in the situation. Do be aware of where you are. So try, so that person you're talking to doesn't feel trapped. They have space to move around, to get up, can clearly see exits if applicable. And think about the level of stimulation that's happening. If you're, talking to somebody who's in a crisis and you're in a room with lots of different things going on, there's loud noises, bright lights, the TV is on, somebody is doing dishes in the kitchen, it might help to move to somebody where less stimulating. Check in with a person. Express your support and concern, offer options, and try to avoid overreacting. Again, be patient. Our emotional support is often ongoing with folks. So taking our time and being patient is really critical. And you can help the person to be connected and to be present. Use affirming statements. This seems to be hard. I can tell how hard you're working right now. I see you're upset. I recognize you. I see you. Use compassionate language, your kind voice. Um, it may be also your direct and clear voice, but it's still kind. Explain what is happening, who you are, who others are. In some crises situations, somebody may be pretty disconnected from their surroundings, and have a really hard time remembering what's happening, figuring, noticing who's who and stuff like that. So those reminders can be helpful. And give people time. Often in a crisis, it feels very fast-paced. So if we get fast-paced, we start expecting other people to be fast-paced, and someone in crisis may not be able to respond quickly. So you ask a question and they don't answer it, that's okay. They could be thinking about it for quite a while. And take time to listen before moving towards solutions. And check in with somebody. We've been talking about this for a while now. Do you feel comfortable thinking about what your next steps might be? That can help. And then practically, kind of checking in on the logistics. Is somebody hungry, angry, lonely, tired? HALT is a great acronym. It's good for us too in keeping in our self-care. And so checking in on those, like really the basic human needs can be helpful in a crisis. A few other tips. So if you aren't familiar with grounding, we've got this tool linked in the chat and we'll send out the slides. So there's a few different things that you can do for grounding. You can name things that you can see or touch. The idea is to bring someone to the present room and situation. Grounding works differently for different people. For some trans and non-binary folks, our bodies are complicated places this also overlaps with people who've survived physical violence. So grounding to a table, to a painting on a wall, rather than grounding to your physical body may be more helpful for some folks. For some folks, thinking about how our bodies feel actually makes things worse. If you're working with somebody long-term, you might get to know that about them and have that in mind when there is kind of that crisis state. And I want to just offer this, many people are worried about not doing enough. So as a reminder, every interaction matters. You don't have to have the answers. So many people report that, they just want someone to listen to them. They want someone to believe them. And often what feels like a crisis or a conflict is stemming from not being heard. So you being there makes a difference. And what do you do after the crisis? So stay connected, follow up with a person. Again, you'll navigate this based on your role, and take care of yourself. So really, that what we're looking for overall is increasing the ways that people are connected to each other and are connected to people who are affirming and supportive. You can also start talking now. So whatever your role is, whether it's you're thinking about friends and family in your life, you're thinking about folks you provide services with, you're thinking about students at a college, your colleagues, you don't have to wait for someone to bring a concern or have a crisis to start talking about mental health, talking about emotional support. Ask people if you're in, that longer term relationship, you're an advocate, you work with the same person over time. Ask what sort of help they would want in the event they need it. Make a plan ahead of time. And let folks know that you're someone you can talk to, both about trans stuff and about violence, about mental health, all of that. And as we get to kind of the close, take care of yourself throughout this. We are humans. We have our own experiences. Many of us maybe relate to some of the stuff I talked about, people experiencing throughout this training. So do consider your own needs and your availability. Think about your physical needs. Um, take care of yourself. If you're coming here, related to work, are you taking bathroom breaks? Are you drinking water? Are you making sure to take your lunch break while you're at work so that you are present with folks? Give yourself permission to not be all things to all people. You recently, I think probably doing research for this or another article, found a list of types of social support that people need. So tangible support, emotional support, connection, or like a sense of belonging, and something else. And it was just a really nice reminder to me that like we can offer different things. So you may be offering somebody the kind of logistical support. You're helping them get their basic needs met. You're helping them find housing. That makes a huge difference. You may be the person who's offering a specific kind of therapy, or you're helping somebody connect to a loving community. So you don't need to be all things to all people, but we do need a community that's working on stuff. And know that some of our work is going to be short term, some of it's going to be long term, and kind of preparing ourselves to be there long term with people. And ask for help. Get support, whether it's through your organization, your supervisor, your peers, whether it's through friends and family, whether it's through additional organizations and resources. Get that help. So feel free to share in the chat how you take care of yourselves. I think this is a big one, and we always need more examples of that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take us to the questions section. Michael or Caleb, did we have any questions that haven't been addressed, or any comments that you want to bring up?
This is Michael. I think you have addressed the questions that have been in the chat.
Great. If folks have additional questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A now. For time, I'm going to share some resources while y'all are typing out your questions. So a couple resources, we are sharing the slides, and Michael's sharing these in the chat. Project Let's has a bunch of mental health resources, and they particularly have resources around people experiencing suicidal ideation. I know there was a comment about that earlier. And this is looking at really community-based resources, so less for folks who don't feel comfortable engaging with 988 or resources that may involve, police intervention or non-consensual hospitalization or things like that. This resource really looks at how communities can do that and has some good, one-on-one tips around presence. And they're very trans-affirming and inclusive too. Moving beyond change efforts, we put this in the chat earlier too. This is from SAMHSA, and looks really at kind of the professionals' role, especially therapists and other licensed service providers, and how you can support and affirm LGBTQI+ youth. And again, if you work with adults, this is still helpful. There's great stuff in there. Same with Equality Texas Mental Health Toolkit. This again is a lot focused on more community members, so family, friends, teachers, loved ones supporting young people. The tips again are good for all ages. And then the Trevor Project has, in addition to their hotline and chat line, they also have written resources. So this is a great place for statistics as well as continuing information, both for the kind of professional side of things and the community member side of things. And these are the references you've gotten all of these chats. So a few of the links we used. And finally, Forge has a lot of resources available. So our website, You can search through recordings, written documents, toolkits, things like that. And then transsurvivors.com is a blog. So there's a ton of different articles there. I think it's really great. And you can follow us on social media of your choice: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube has lots of our recordings. And this is me. Again, I'm Emile, and so happy to have been with y'all today. There's my email, so you will get these slides tomorrow, but you are also welcome to email and connect with me particularly. And just thank you all so much. And thank you for filling out the evaluation that Michael just put in the chat. That evaluation helps us do what we do better, and our funders like it. But really, it's a place for us to say what else is needed, what's the next steps. I know this was an introduction, so let us know what else you want to see. And thank you for the work that you do for supporting survivors, for supporting trans and non-binary communities. It was really great to share space with everyone today. And we look forward to talking more and seeing you on future webinars and trainings. Please take care of yourselves. Thank you for what you do for your communities.